do you know about real estate in South Korea, in particular Seoul? Seoul is one of the most densely packed cities in the world. Hey, I'm Nichola.
Hi, I'm Hugh.
And we are
MKH.
I think a lot of people, maybe the only thing they know about housing in Seoul is what they've seen in the movie Parasite, right? Academy Award winning Parasite. Woo! Koreans are so proud, right?
Of course, of course.
So in that movie, it showed like the dismal, dank, like semi-basement apartment, and then it showed like the wonderful, bright, like $10 million house in Seoul, right? So those are two extremes. Most people live in a place that's kind of somewhere in between those extremes.
Yes. I mean, the $10 million, how many percentage of people?
Very, very small percentage of people
Yes.
live in a house that amazing. And a lot of people do live in the semi-basements, but they're not always as bad.
And also lots of Korean people living in luxury apartment.
We're going to get to the apart a bit later. So we do live in Seoul, and we are going to explain in this video different types of housing in Seoul and then our experience of finding a new place to live, because we have a child now. We have a toddler. He's 2, turning 3 this year, and we need more space. So we have spent several months looking for a new place, and we did find one, but we're going to give a lot more background to this as well. For those that are new to this channel, I am Australian.
I'm Korean.
And you've lived in Korea. Well, you were born in Korea.
Yes.
So most of your life in Korea.
I'm Korean.
And then some time in Australia where we met. And we moved to Korea. You moved back to Korea, and I moved to Korea after we were married, 2014. And we lived with your parents in the countryside. So if you go back, like back on our channel, you'll see some videos about that. And in 2016, we moved to Seoul, and we moved to this apartment. Could you think of living anywhere else besides Seoul at the moment?
No.
I feel like, yeah, we want to live in Seoul. We enjoy living in Seoul. And a lot of people want to live in Seoul. A lot of people do live in Seoul. But there's definitely good reason for that.
Yeah, some people don't like to live in Seoul because it's too crowded. But some people like.
You like.
Yes, I like.
There's a lot of good things in Seoul. If you have watched YouTube videos about people living in Korea and people showing their apartments, you might have seen the type of apartments that can be called like one room, like a studio or an office tel. And so that's a lot of the content that's on YouTube around that, because it's people coming to Korea often to teach English, right? And schools often provide that accommodation for them. Or it's people that are couples and they don't have kids yet. So I think there's a big difference in that type of housing compared to the situation we're in, right? How has our priorities changed since we've had a kid?
Of course, the space, because when my son, like you, was young, was okay because
he's a little baby.
Yeah, he couldn't really run or just walk much, or he just stay there. But now he's quite big, and he just run from there to there. Just that's it. Like
that's
whole
the space.
house.
Yeah.
It's really actually sad for as a parents. So I want to go somewhere bigger, so he can actually run. Yeah,
it's very different, I think, when we were a couple before we had a kid, you know, you just having a smaller space is okay. You have a nice little place and you're like, this is fine, you know, and that's why there's lots of great apartments in Seoul that cater to that. But what about families in Seoul? So we're going to dig a little bit deeper about that. Okay, real estate offices in Korea are very different to what I'm used to in Australia. You know, in Australia you go to like LJ Hooker or Rain and Horn or whatever, and it's usually quite a big business and quite, you know, flashy, and you know, this real estate agents that are very charismatic and that. Real estate is very different in Korea because they're very small little offices, and they're everywhere on the corner, right? Like, and so they're not really flashy. They'll just literally be like a room and like 2 guys sitting there or something like that.
And usually older people, but these days it's
there's younger people.
Yeah, these days more younger people are joining, but usually it was called Bokdokbang, which is like old people who knows that area local really well, and they did their own business.
Yeah.
Because that time there wasn't like internet like this, so
Yeah.
the old people, they ask their the local people, I wanna sell it. Oh, are you looking for somewhere? So they have to go to the Bokdokbang to find the.
That makes so
place.
much sense about why they're so localized. Like, you know, this little neighborhood, this little neighborhood, this little neighborhood. Very different to a lot of Western countries, I think. There's a bit of construction going on outside, but hopefully you can't hear that much. So as you mentioned, there's now real estate apps. So the 3 main apps that we used was Jikbang, the Naver Real Estate app, is that just called that? The Naver Real Estate app, and Peter Pan, which is very unusual.
And there's a one called Dabang as well.
Yeah, which sounds dodgy to me as well. And so we would look at these a lot. Now Jikbang would have some, and Jikbang always has photos, some very dodgy, weird photos sometimes. And I realized this when we would go with real estate agents to places. These ajashis, middle-aged men, would just walk in and be like, take a photo, take a photo, take a photo, upload, which is very, very different to how they stage photos in Australian homes for when they're going on the website or whatever, and they, you know, have all really good lighting and that. On Jikbang, it's just like these, sometimes they're completely blurry as well. But at least there's photos, because then on the Naver app, a lot of the places just don't have any photos, right?
No.
So you've got to call up and go see the place to really get a feel of what the place is like. And then the Peter Pan app has a lot of very nice photos. So they're staging the photos really well. And we found that most of the places in this area on the Peter Pan app were new buildings, right?
Yes.
Yes.
So if you are looking for some like new buildings, check the Peter Pan.
Yes, check there. So we have lived in this place for 4 years, and of course, having a kid, we need to go to a bigger space. Now, I think a lot of people might have heard that Korea has a really unique rental system, so we're going to talk a little bit about that. So monthly rent is called wolse. And I mean, this is normal in a lot of countries, right? You pay monthly, or in Australia, often people pay fortnightly, but paying your rent like once a month, that is quite normal. And that is normal in Korea. So the thing that can be a little bit different about wolse is that there's something that is a very big deposit. And I hear a lot of foreigners always talk about, oh, key money, but like for me, we've just spoken in English and said deposit. And
I think deposit
is a better translation.
I guess so. Key money is usually the how much key price is, right?
Yeah. How much a key costs.
That's what I did when I was in Australia, because one card was like $100 value, so we gave them like a $500 or something. But this one is different.
Different. Like, we just say
we
deposit.
Give them 5,000 or 10,000.
But then I'll hear foreigners in Korea talk about, the key money. Like,
maybe.
I think different circles, there's different words being used. So of course you have a deposit or a bond, like in Australia we would say. But in Korea it can be quite big. So for our place here, we put down about $10,000. Now, I'm going to use the word dollars because won is not going to make sense to a lot of people, and we're going to be talking in millions and people are going to freak out. So think of American dollars, but maybe like a little bit less than just a little bit less of what the American dollar is worth. So our deposit here was $10,000, which a lot of people will be like, oh my gosh, that's so much. But we do get that back. And the deposit can range from about $5,000 through to about $100,000 for wolse. Yeah. Would you say? I've sort of seen
or
it.
More than
or,
that.
Or more than that. So we still have to pay rent monthly. Now, as an Australian and somebody that has lived in Sydney, and we have lived in Sydney together, we find the actual rent to be a lot cheaper here, would you say?
A lot cheaper. It's how much we pay now is for 1 month, is only for 1 week in Australia.
Yeah, 1 week would be 1 week in Australia, and possibly in some areas of Sydney like a share room. So it's sort of like if you have that bigger deposit, then you know your standard of living is still really good in Korea, and things aren't as expensive as a lot of things in Australia or some other Western countries. Now, this is where things get a little bit stranger. There is something in Korea called
전세.
Jeonse. And this is when you put down a very, very big deposit, but you don't pay any monthly rent. So usually the deposit is about 70 to 80% of the apartment price.
Yes.
I mean, it can vary, but it's almost the amount of money you would put down to actually buy a place. But you don't pay monthly rent and you get the money back
When you leave.
when you leave. So a lot of people freak out, you know, putting hundreds and thousands of dollars down. They're like, what if you don't get the money back? Or you get the money back, and it means that from month to month you're not paying rent. Now, if you have that lump sum, then that's great. A lot of people don't have that lump sum, so you get a bank loan and you are paying the bank off instead of paying your landlord. So what does the owner do with that money then? Like, they've been given like a big lump sum. What are they doing with that money? Because they've still got to give it back at some point.
Yeah, but when they get the money, I think they will invest the money to another thing.
They make money off that money.
Yes.
Yeah. And large amounts of money get moved around a lot in Korea. It's quite normal here.
Even though you just put the money in the bank, you still get the interest
Yeah.
from it.
Yeah. And Jeonse is still really normal. Like, I think, is it maybe happening a little bit less, but it's still quite a normal thing, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And when we were looking, it was all Jeonse. So that's why we decided to go that way. And like I was saying, Koreans, no one expect this, so they're either saving up money, often parents put down money. So it's quite a shock when foreigners come to Korea, and both Wolse and Jeonse, so both for monthly and for putting down Jeonse, they might not have that lump sum of money, and that can be difficult. So they can end up paying a higher monthly rate because they don't have the big deposit to put down. Oh, what about 반전세?
반전세 is you pay half of the 전세 and then you pay less monthly pay.
So it's sort of like in between, and you sort of negotiate with your landlord as well. I think the positive thing about Jeonse is you're getting this money back. So you still, of course, if you have a bank loan, you're paying the interest and that type of thing, but it can work out to be cheaper in the long run because you're not just losing that monthly rent like that.
Yes, and also even though you pay the interest to the bank, it's still a lot cheaper than you pay monthly.
Yeah, because I mean, definitely there's a lot of people that just pay a monthly rent, and they can pay like a really high price for that for whatever reasons. But I think for a lot of families, Jeonse is the way that they go.
That's why so many people they start from the Wolse and then they move to Jeonse, and then eventually they buy their own house.
Because it does sort of set up a system where if things are continuing, like your work and everything is going well, you get that, if you already saved up money and then you get your Jeonse back, you have quite a large amount of money that you can then actually buy a house with as time goes by. That's what our strategy at the moment is. So we're on that Jeonse step now, right? So we've been doing Wolse and we're going to Jeonse. I also wanted to make it clear that this is not YouTube money. Like, our Jeonse is not YouTube money. I know a lot of people think like YouTubers like make so much money and then they get the big house and everything like that. There's a very small percentage of people that do, and there's a lot of YouTubers that pretend to be rich. I'm not going to say a lot. I would say possibly there might be a few people that pretend to have more wealth than they do, but we're going to be completely honest and like, this is not YouTube money. His business has been going really well. You have a great credit score, so you were able to show the bank that
Number one.
you're in the number one thing.
I just got in the morning. I said it was credit number 3, and now
you're up
the
here
first
now.
grade.
Oh wow, great!
Yeah.
So he's got a great credit score, so that's very helpful for us. And also, my parents, who are baby boomers, are helping us out as well. So it's sort of a combination of us being in a privileged situation, combination of Hugh's hard work and your credit score. We're in a position where we can do Jeonse. Let's talk a little bit about places you can rent or buy in Korea, in particular Seoul. A house. Can you buy a house in Seoul?
Yes.
If you have $1 million or more.
Yes.
I think that's normal for most big cities, like big mega cities like this, an actual house with a yard. Like you can get a house with a yard here. Definitely. There's a bunch of them in our neighborhood. They're all going to be $1 million or more. A lot of people live in something that is called a villa. Now we're going to be using some Konglish words, so because villa means sort of something different in English. So we're going to be mixing up the English and the Korean words. But a villa is what we are in at the moment. And this is a sort of medium-sized building that has a bunch of apartments in it. And I use the word apartment in the English sense because if you use the word apartment in the Korean sense, it means something different, but in English, apartment is just any type of dwelling that is not a house. And in Australia, we also say flat as well. It's going to be a little bit confusing.
Very confusing.
So villas don't usually have an outside space, but some of them might have a terrace or a balcony. Yeah. So you can definitely get a terrace or a balcony like that. They also have an enclosed area that is called a veranda where often like the washing machine goes, but there's different places when it's built, but definitely a villa is something that a lot of people live in.
Different structure, so like you can't say all villas are looks like this because we've been so many different types of villas, but our house now the structure is really good. That's why we choose this one.
Yeah.
Even though it's quite small, you are not. We don't really have the space that wasting, but so many other place there's space that wasting like kind of like a useless space.
And so there's a lot of variation with what villas you have, and most villas don't have a lift and elevator, but newer ones can. Yeah. And the reason why the old ones don't is because they usually only go up to 4 or 5 levels. So they're like, people can walk up that. As a mother with a toddler and a stroller, it's hard. It's hard for a lot of parents, I think.
But the newer one with the elevator, it costs a little bit more than old apartment. Yeah. And also you need to pay monthly.
You have to pay a service fee, which we don't have here.
And using elevator and that kind of stuff.
Also, a lot of the new villas, I feel like the space can be quite small.
Yes.
They're putting in a lot of things where they're calling it like luxury, and the finishings will be very nice and that. But if you're a family, they've shrunk the space a lot more. And in older buildings, the veranda will be quite long along one side of it where you have storage and the washing machine. But now they've shrunk it to these little rooms where you can put the washing machine in. Like, I'm quite obsessed with the way that buildings and homes have changed in Korea. I can talk about it for ages, which I won't talk about that too much now. But definitely there is a benefit in some older buildings because you actually have more space. Because they're trying to cram more people in and they're telling people, oh, this is luxury, look at this. But when you look at the dimensions, it's so much smaller. Speaking about something else that can be negative, let's talk about semi-basement apartments. So as you saw in Parasite, this is not a great place to live. It's half underground, and in Parasite, there's the guy pissing and people smoking and that type of thing. There is a historical reason why there are semi-basement apartments like that. So in the 1960s, there was a lot of tension with North Korea. I think there was commandos that came in to try and kill the president. There was some terrorist attacks and that type of thing. So South Korea was very on edge and worried. So in their building regulations, they were like, you need to have basements in these buildings so they can be bunkers in case something happens. But then fast forward to the 1980s and everybody's moving to Seoul. There's not enough housing in Seoul. There was a real housing crisis. So the government was like, okay, well now people can live in these basements. So they become these semi-basement apartments.
I didn't know that.
This is what I mean that I researched so much about this. I love talking about this type of stuff. But a lot of them are not as bad as Parasite makes them out to be. Of course, there's definitely some places like that. There's definitely some horrible ones. But a lot of semi-basement places have been remodeled. You can see that they actually have enough light and they can be okay to live in. I know a bunch of people that live in them, and a lot of people live in them to start with to save up money to then get John to get a
And
bigger
go
place
higher
like that.
up, higher,
Yeah,
higher.
there's definitely a little bit of stigma with them. You know, people can feel ashamed to say they live in a semi-basement place, but the government is actually helping a lot of those people out. So I was reading an article just recently, the government's putting more money into making them better to hopefully make sure there's not flooding like that, and things like aircon and that type of thing. So I think the government's really wanting to improve the image of them as well. Another type of building is a house that each level has a different family on them. What are they called?
다세대 주택?
Okay, I never remember that one. This is one where it is a house but doesn't have a very big yard. It might have like a little courtyard or none at all, and often has a rooftop. And the owners of the whole building often live on the ground floor or the second floor, and then other families or other people will live on the other levels. And some of them have a semi-basement as well. So it's a smaller building than a big villa building. So it might be like, 3 or 4 families, but each level is usually one apartment. So if the actual building is a decent space, you can have like a good sized apartment in those ones. And so those are ones that I was quite curious about, because if you're on the 3rd floor, you possibly have the whole rooftop to yourself, which is outside space.
Yeah, and 다가구 has like one building and like many different families living in there, so the price is quite lower than others, but think about the other inconvenience.
Having to see other families as you come out.
the noise, and also privacy, and also security, and that kind of stuff.
The one thing you were really worried about is if we move into one of those places, and then there's it's usually an older couple that own these type of ones, like they've lived in this building, this house for like decades. If you have a landlord that lives right under you and your landlord is a pain in the bum, then that's what you were worried about, right?
I don't wanna
deal with them. Now let's talk about what is technically an apartment in Korea. So in Korean, you would actually say the word 아파트. 아파트 is a certain type of building in Korea, and there's specific like regulations and how things have to be. I think they have to have that enclosed balcony, right? I think is something that I've read is something that what makes an apartment or 아파트. There's balconies, but they're all enclosed, which it can be very weird from a Western perspective. Like they're still counted as a balcony, and that it'll be a big window, but it's still technically inside. Apartments can be very expensive as well, because there is a feeling of luxury and security that comes with them.
Apartment in Korea is for like little bit higher up, like luxury.
You've moved up in society a
you
little bit.
are not living in semi-basement anymore.
Yeah.
So you are up there. And usually apartment has a security guy. And then there's a door that you need to go past. So have security and many people living together. So people think less crime in there as well. And also you use elevator,
lift is always a lift, yes.
Convenience stuff. When you go higher up, of course you can see the good views
like that. So Korea has a lot of apartment towers, and in Seoul they're not as like, they're still big in Seoul, but on the outskirts of Seoul are those massive ones, right?
Yes.
Like the ones in our neighborhood are not as tall as some of the ones on the outskirts of Seoul. The thing about apartments, and this is a big cultural difference, is like I haven't liked apartments that much, also because I haven't been like socialized in Korea, so I don't have the same feeling of like, oh, this is really great to have this type of apartment. For me as an Australian, I would rather have a villa that has a outside space. I mean, because you can get some like that, but it's still hard to get. But for me, actual real outside space, private outside space, is very important, whereas these type of apartments, the only outside space, real outside space, is communal. So very big cultural difference there. So, and when we were looking, we were like, we're not even going to look at apartments because we wouldn't be able to afford them in this area, because I feel like there's an extra like $200,000 to $300,000 placed on this simply because it's an apartment. That's my feeling. Like that was my feeling. Like I settle for the sort of like the terrace Just this little courtyard, a little bit that like you can like play with some water or something like that. I also don't like the feeling of being like so disconnected from like the neighborhood and the shops and the restaurants and that type of thing. These apartment towers like that, and some of them I find to be really ugly. But some of the newer ones like iPark near us are much better looking, but there's still so many ugly apartment buildings.
And it's just so expensive, over $1 million.
So they can be so expensive. Let's talk about our search for a new place. So we wanted to stay in this area. Why?
Because I like this place. Because of food and everything. Like girls' daycare is close here.
Yeah, we're close to the river.
And I like this community here in this area.
Yeah, we have a community here. We're still close to like Hongdae, and we're still close to entertainment and shops and that. We're still close to Mangwon markets. It's actually a really amazing
location,
area.
Yeah. Near, close to the Han River.
Yeah, and big parks and everything over like World Cup Park and that. Unfortunately, that means a lot of people want to live here. And it means that a lot of people are not moving from this area, so it can be a little bit hard to find a good place here. We also started looking before this current world crisis happened, but thankfully Korea has not had a lockdown and things have been somewhat normal for us, so that still allowed us to go out and actually look at places. If you are wondering about that, we were still able to look at places.
I mean, Korea was never been locked down.
We didn't have any lockdown. And things are going pretty well at the moment. What did you feel when you saw like the first few places?
I just want to move soon as possible. Our space is still quite small, so wherever we saw,
you just were like, this is fine.
Yeah, it was pretty good. But of course, I don't want it to make decision right away. So we have been seeing so many.
I think we ended up seeing about 25 places altogether. And I wanted to, before we went to them, I was like, oh, I want to film because I want to make this video to show people. But most of these places, pretty much all of them, people were still living in them at the time, and I did not feel comfortable doing that and sticking a camera in people's faces to show they've got all their stuff there. I didn't want to invade their privacy like that. Some of the places that we saw, I felt were so disappointing for the amount of money. In the first few places, I was like, it's not quite what I want. So we kept looking and we kept looking. And we did see a place where we walked in and there was a terrace. And that was the first thing we saw. And we were like, oh my gosh. There is a terrace, like it's a big space, there's like still like taps or water access, and there was a big storage shed thing, and we're like, this can literally be a backyard, oh my god. And what happened?
But the inside was too small.
It was really way too small. And as we were looking at places, we had our priorities. So we knew we weren't going to budge on location, so that narrowed it down, and then space was the thing. So we knew pretty much instantly when we'd walk into a place, this is not good enough, this is not big enough. We were very, very picky. I'm sorry to all the real estate agents that showed us so many places.
I mean,
their job.
Their job, and we paying them,
yes,
and
true.
We are going to live there. So of course it's important.
Also, like, my advice to people is like, there are definitely dodgy real estate agents that will just show you one place and be like, you won't get anything better than this. This is the best place. You won't get anything better. If they say that to you, they're lying.
Every time. They will say.
They will say you won't be able to find a place better than this, and it will be some dodgy, below average place. Just keep looking, there's definitely a better place. I guess like we hear that there's people that will find, like they'll just look at 3 places and pick one, and there's people like us that look at 1 million places. For me, I really wanted some type of outside space, but we also, it had to be 3-bedroom with a big living space and 1 or 2 bathrooms. It was 1 bathroom, that's okay. So we knew what we were looking for, but there just wasn't anything matching like criteria yet.
Yeah, like some place, space is pretty good, but doesn't have these things, and then the toilet is not right. Like all, so we made a priority. What is the most important? The location and space, and then veranda and that kind of things.
Then in one day, so this was like months of looking, and we would check the apps every day and like go to real estate agents, just walk in to say this is what we want. Then in one day we saw 3 potential places. You know, there's a saying in English, like when it rains it pours, like it all happens at once. And I saw this one on the Neighbor app, and the space looked really good, and it had this outside area, like a terrace, like a roof over it, but like outside area. The problem was it was a little bit further than what we wanted, but we went and saw it, and it was one of those places, what is it called?
다세대.
Yes, one of those places. And it was a little bit older, and the bathrooms were not so great, but they're all things we're willing to compromise on for space. So we had already talked about this. Like, we don't mind if a place is a little bit older, a little bit run down. We can, you know, fix things up a little bit, but space was the most important thing. So we saw this, and what was our feeling at the time?
We might be, you know, living here. That was our feeling.
Yeah.
But
we were so torn though. We're like, because this, it was still be able to walk towards, you know, walk to Yule's daycare, but it would be quite a walk, and we would be further away from our community of like people that we know as well. But it was the first place we'd seen that had space like that. So I remember like afterward just being like, oh my gosh, what do we do? Do we take this one? Is this going to be it? And just not knowing at that point. And then we went to see another one, still kind of in the area that we wanted, but not quite the area that we wanted. And it was about 4 levels up. So we trudge up these stairs, and it's an older villa, but it's currently being remodeled. And we walked in, what? Wow, this is really nice. I really like the space. It was an awesome space, 3 bedroom, 2 bathroom. And then we go out onto the little veranda bit, and there is a terrace. So I was like, oh my gosh. The thing is, the terrace still needs work. And to make it safe and to make it sort of like as a backyard, we would have to put up fence. And I've seen other people do that around. So I knew what I wanted to do with it. And being remodeled, so we wouldn't have to do much with it. And I was like, wow, we're not going to find better than this. How did you feel about that place?
I really like it. Really like it. But I was just thinking, okay, this is a really good place. But it's level 4. It's quite hard to...
It's still hard with a toddler, but at that time, you know, we hadn't seen any places with lifts at all. Like, I sort of was resigned to the fact that it's going to suck. That's just how buildings are.
Another thing, like, really good. I mean, the natural light was coming in. Like, everything was pretty good. The kitchen was nice, and everything's
all new.
clean.
Everything's
new. Pretty new.
Yeah.
But the location wasn't bad as well.
Better than the other place.
Yeah, but the car park is
kind of annoying.
Like, if someone parked earlier than me, I have nowhere to park. That kind of situation. So
yeah,
I wasn't sure.
You weren't completely sold on it, but no. I was just thinking of the outside space.
You already decided.
I was like, oh my gosh, we're going to put up a fence, make it safer. Then we're going to put like grass down. I'm going to have like a swimming pool.
You're already like, oh, your mind, like you want to make something. And then I got her the real estate agent name card.
Yeah.
And I will call you later.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
You know, and Nichola said like, oh, we don't need to see next one. We just decide this one.
And you were like, we've got one more place to see.
We have got one more.
Also, I remember saying, there's no way another place is going to be better than this place. And I was like, it's going to have to be a pretty amazing place to be better than this place. Yes. I was so set on number 2. So we go to number 3. It's an apartment building. Oh, means there's a lift. Oh, well, that's a good thing, having a lift. Okay. And then we go in.
And it was level 2.
Level 2. So even the stairs is so much easier than all these other places that we're seeing. Even if they didn't have lift, the stairs were still so much easier. And we go in to the biggest space we had seen out of all the places we'd been looking at for months.
It's huge.
What was your feeling when you walked in?
I saw the living room area, and first thing I imagined in my head, like you was walking
Yeah.
and running around
Yeah.
the living room.
Yeah.
That was first thing in my head. So
Wow.
wow, really.
And I was just like, wow. But I was also almost angry because I'm like, how can we pass up this one? But then it doesn't have the outside space. What it does have is the enclosed balcony. And you'll be able to see in the photos that I show, it has the enclosed balcony, but it doesn't have the terrace. My heart was set on having a terrace, but this space is so big. There's a huge kitchen, there's the back veranda as well. There's a master with a dressing room and like a big ensuite master bedroom. There's the other, like it was all these things. And at that point, I remember walking away going, oh crap, what do we do? Like we'd eliminated number one, but now this, what is it? And I knew you wanted the apartment. And I was still like, I really like number two. I really like number two. And then I talked to my mum friends and I was like, what do you think is more important? Having the actual outside space or having a lift? All my mum friends, the lift, the lift, the lift. They said, don't care about the outside space. You'll make do. Have the lift. And I was like, okay. And then I thought about it. And then I think just by that night, I was like, okay, we're going with the apartment. Even though all this time I was like, I hate apartments. I don't need to live in an apartment. I'm Australian. I'm just going to have a villa with a terrace. And now I'm back in the Korean mindset of apartment living.
And the space.
And the space.
Bigger.
The thing, because what it came down to, was our priority was space, number one. So it came down to that. And then the next morning, we took Yul to go see it. The real estate agent was very kind and let us go in the next morning. And the family living there were really, really lovely. It had wonderful, nice family vibe. Yul really liked it, of course. And
he ran and he just fell down.
He ran and fell down. But yeah, I could really, really cement it for me. Then I was like, this place is amazing. We're going to take this place. And then I realized the front balcony, I can have that as outside space. I can put a play equipment there for him. I can put a little paddling, like toddler pool there because there's drainage there. There's tiles and there's drainage. So those things that were really important for me, like having a sand pit for him, having like a little swimming pool, I can do that at this place. It's not the same type of terrace, but I can do that. So I was like, okay, this place is amazing. It is the higher reach of our budget, but it completely worth it. It seemed something that would be impossible actually to get, and now it was here. So we were like, yes, we're gonna take this right away. And so we took that it came on the market, and within 24 hours we had taken it. Because
so we are the first person who contacted and saw, and we got a contract.
Because I think anybody else going would take it as well. And that's why I always say to like friends that are looking, like, look, every hour, look at the app and check and call right away, because you have to get in to get the good places.
And the location-wise, the best location than any other spaces.
Closest to our community area, closest to the daycare.
Still our...
closest to the river, actually.
Yeah, closer than this one, actually. Yeah, it's really close to the river, which is really great. And also the sunlight coming all the
natural light.
Natural light.
And the other thing is, because it's level 2, the only thing underneath us is car park. So parking.
You can just run around.
We're not going to be annoying neighbors underneath with like toddler run like that.
Which is amazing. And also, I have my own car park.
Nobody else can park there.
That's mine.
So we settled all that, but it was sort of 6 weeks before we could move or they could move. I mean, actually the actual dates for them moving out and our lease ending here worked out well, but now it's just a countdown to move to this new place. Now, this place was built 2004, and the family that's been living there has lived there for years and years and years. So that was the sort of between those two places. There was the one it's being remodeled. It has a terrace, but it's up 4 flights of stairs. Or there's the very big one that is an apartment that has a lift, but, you know, a little bit outdated, needs some sort of updates and that type of thing. But it came down to, you know, having the big space and having the lift like that. So I think we made the right choice. And also, we're going to be able to show you what we do with the place as well and how we make use of the space, which is really, really exciting. I'm so excited to make videos about this and like to have like a big family home. Like for us, we've gone from Sydney, living with my parents, Sydney share house, like sharing with other couples, to Korean countryside, living with your parents, to then like living in Seoul but in a small villa, and now we are moving to a big 3-bedroom 2-bathroom apartment in an awesome area. Wow.
I'm really excited. Really excited.
Yeah, I mean also you can get bigger homes outside of Seoul. If you go live in the countryside with the same amount of money, you can get like a massive home with a backyard. You can buy a huge house outside of Seoul, but you're not in Seoul. And if you have to travel into Seoul to work, like a lot of people do, that's an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours out of your day to do that. So for us, we wanted to stay in Seoul. We put a lot of effort into finding a place, and we've been very, very lucky, and we're so excited to show you guys as well. And we're so excited for Yul to have a big, big space like that and still be near the river. And yeah. Yay!
So if you are looking for space in Korea, just look as much as you
keep
can.
Keep looking. One of the reasons why I'm really interested in the modern Korean architecture and the places that there are is because Seoul is such a crammed in city. There's so many people living here, and people can make really interesting use of the spaces. And when we first started looking, I kind of really wanted one of those unusual places, like they're very interesting places, but I am happy with the place that we ended up with. But I'm always fascinated about the different spaces and how people live in Seoul. Alright, if you haven't subscribed to us and you're interested in this type of content of us living in Seoul and showing when we move to our new place, the moving, the redecorating, all that type of stuff, please subscribe. Or if you were interested in stuff about being an intercultural, a bilingual family, please subscribe. And we will see you guys later.
Bye.
Bye.